80-year-old North London local Leah Adri-Sejoko loved her garden and neighbourhood allotment at the Colindale allotment site in northwest London.
She really liked it there. She liked being able to grow her own food. She enjoyed meeting all the different people.
As the voluntary secretary for the allotments, Leah acted as coordinator and peacekeeper whenever passions would rise high.
Leah was the diplomat and trying to keep everybody happy as a family community.
On the evening of the 27th of February 2017, Leah failed to appear at an allotment committee meeting. Leah was reported missing at 1:40 a.m. Where is Leah Adri-Sejoko, and what does her disappearance have to do with the North London allotments? I'm Dermot Murnaghan, and this is Killer Britain. This case was based around an allotment in North London. In the early morning of Monday, the 27th of February, Leah Adri-Sejoko from North London was reported missing. She'd been due at an allotment committee meeting the previous evening, but had failed to appear. Friends called to check in on her, but there was no answer.
Calls to her went to voicemail, and so it became known to the family that she hadn't kept this appointment. The friend and the members of the family began looking for her. They retraced the steps that she would have taken to the tube station. Her daughter rang the local hospitals. They went to the allotment.
Because she should either be at home, at the allotment, or at this meeting. The family searched locally.
They eventually took themselves to the Colindale police station to report her missing at about 1:30 in the early hours of the following morning. By then, she'd been missing for about 6 to 7 hours. The police obviously spoke to the family about where she might have been and learnt of her connection to the allotment, and they went there with the family.
Just before 2 a.m, dark and raining, the police and family secured access to the Colindale allotments. They continued to try to contact Leah by phone.
They get into the allotment. Imagine it's dark now, and there's no CCTV there, and they ring Leah's mobile phone. And you can only imagine how awful this would be. They hear it coming from inside a shed, which is called the mower shed.
The phone could clearly be heard coming from within the shed. The police forced the lock.
They see Leah lying. They made efforts, but tragically that was not to be. And the family are there, and they've seen their mum and grandmother in the most awful state.
For the family of 80-year-old Leah, the discovery was shocking and devastating.
A lot of people said they can't imagine what a family like this goes through. And I always said, don't try. In the end, it's the worst thing in the world to lose anyone to violence.
Whilst the family attempted to process the discovery, police recognised that this had now moved from a missing persons case to one of homicide. Detectives were called in and they began to investigate the murder scene.
She's covered with a coat, a blue coat, and we think that's so significant because whoever killed her, we believe must have known her, because psychology would suggest they either regret or they're trying to cover up the person that they killed.
Other evidence also became apparent to detectives.
The motive couldn't have been theft because they didn't steal her phone. The killer has come out and then locked the door. Now, it can't be Leah's keys to the shed because they're in her pocket.
The police very quickly established that the lock on the mower shed was one that required the use of the key to lock it. And so they knew from a very, very early stage that the killer had a key to that lock.
And it's so significant because there's only 4 keys to that lock.
Just who would have wanted to kill a much-loved and respected member of the allotment community, and why?
It's 100 plots in the middle of London. You got the Edgware Road running at the top. You just wouldn't think that's the case. And everyone is really friendly, everyone knows everybody. What was particularly concerning and odd is normally you would know your killer, but this is an elderly lady, but certainly sprightly, really active, no known enemies. You know, normally there's a bit of a gang rift or criminal rivalry, no domestic tension. And there's more questions than answers in Leah's lifestyle.
Homicide stories that hit the headlines are often stranger murders. But in reality, 3/4 of murder victims know their killer. One of the detectives' working theories was that whoever had locked Leah inside the shed also had an allotment. Someone who'd been aware of the mower shed and had access to it. Police set about building a complete picture of the life of Leah Adri Sejoko. Leah moved to the UK with her Indonesian husband in the 1960s. They settled in the London suburb of Colindale. She began gardening seriously in the 1990s.
You know, after she retired, she liked basically being busy, having something to do, having something that basically made things better for, not just for her, but for, for other people, enabling people to use the allotment. Just before my sister Tessa, she got an allotment and Mum would go and help. It got so that Tessa wasn't spending as much time as the allotment, so Mum took over the allotment and started there. She liked cooking, so she liked to have vegetables and she liked to grow those. So there would be tomato plants around and stuff like that.
Over 20 years, Leah became secretary and treasurer of the allotments.
Like everybody's grandmother is probably the best way to describe her. Leah was the diplomat and try and keep everybody happy as a family community.
She was a fairly well-known pillar of the community. By all accounts, she was a lovely woman, and she was also very kind to people that she came across in her capacity as an important member of these committees.
Within the allotment community, they all really respected her. If they had an issue, they would want to talk to Mum about it because they felt she would give them a fair hearing and do her best as far as she could to help out any issues that they've got.
Noel McHugh, the senior investigating Metropolitan Police officer, had little intelligence to work with. A seemingly ordinary older woman with no enemies.
In this map, it lays out Colindale, where we are in proximity to Colindale Tube, and you can see that this area here is all green. This is the allotments, some 100 or so allotments where we've done all of the house to house to work out who actually lives in this area.
The investigators were starting to hear one name a lot, that of 42-year-old Rahim Mohammadi. McHugh and his team learnt that Mr. Mohammadi had been a close friend of Leah. Mohammadi had arrived at the allotments via a unique project, Freedom from Torture, a charity which offered horticultural therapy for refugees who were survivors of torture. In 2006, psychotherapist Jochenenka began working with the charity, providing therapy for refugees at Colindale allotments.
He wouldn't talk, he wouldn't smile, he wouldn't look at you, he wouldn't relate to you. He would just be around. You could see he was listening in, but actually he was not participating at all.
His origins were in the Kurdish community in Iran. He was subjected to torture whilst in Iran, causing him to flee to the United Kingdom. He suffered as a consequence symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
And treatment for that PTSD included gardening therapy at Colindale.
We went every Wednesday, meeting at 10 and leaving at 4. There was this big gate in front of the allotment. And the moment people opened that gate, I told them, try to forget. Just be here.
Mohammadi found that his PTSD eased simply by working the soil on the 1 day a week that the scheme operated. He relished the opportunity to take control of his own piece of England.
Here we have Leah's plot, which is quite large. That was her pride and joy. And then Mohammadi's plot over here. And within this area of brown and green, you've got the best part of 100 allotments.
He comes from a community, they do gardening, and he built his own shed and basically lived outside in nature. Yeah, that was his life.
100 refugees escaping from torture used Colindale for allotment therapy between 2008 and 2018.
The group changed the atmosphere on the allotment. There's a microcosm of society, and some people didn't want us to be there. But generally, I would say there was much more love and care and appreciation than negative energy.
Leah, once a newcomer to England herself, welcomed the charity.
To my understanding, she took a lot of sympathy with Rahim Mohammadi, and she sort of took this very traumatized and very troubled man under her wing.
Leah was very supportive. For her, it was also kind of therapeutic to be with us and to feel that spaciousness you experience when you're with people.
The friends she made and she had were very, very close and very loyal. They all loved Mum.
It seemed Rahim Mohammadi was fond of Leah too. The pair formed a firm friendship.
The old lady and the young man, and different cultures and different lives and different backgrounds and everything different, but they meet in this, where we all meet. And that peace.
She did things to try and help him. She worked with him. You know, I think he did the odd job around the garden, at house, cutting things back.
He became very fond of her, not least because she was extremely good to him. She indulged him.
What became crucial to understanding Rahim Mohammadi's behaviour at the allotments was understanding his desire to have his own space at this vast allotment site. At first, as with the others in the group, he had access to Colindale just once a week. But Mohammadi wanted full-time access to a plot of his own. And allotment plots on sites such as this often come with a long waiting list. Who better than Leah Adri Sejoko to help him acquire his own plot?
She had helped us to get more plots, and at the end, I think we had 10 plots on that. So individual people like Rahim, he got his own plot and looked after it.
He lived alone. He had a bedsit in Hackney, and he used to travel to the allotment on public transport pretty much every day. By the early part of 2017, it was quite obvious it was the centre of his life.
And he was passionate and also a bit of a busybody around the allotments and featured in Leah's life.
Mohammadi had wanted more control in the management of the allotments to ensure standards were met. He assisted Leah in management and coordination. Detectives identified him as someone who had known her well.
He presented himself as a lifelong friend, really dependable on Leah, and he was dealt with as a witness because he came across so convincingly.
North London detectives were investigating the suspicious death of 80-year-old Leah Adri Sejoko. Their inquiries were focused on a network of allotments in the Colindale area, where her body was discovered in the early hours of the 28th of February 2017. Police were in the process of gathering information from fellow allotment holder, 42-year-old Rahim Mohammadi.
I think he did the odd job around the garden at house, cutting things back.
She was elderly and she needed help. Also on her allotment, she couldn't do her allotment anymore.
What Mohammadi wanted in exchange was a place on the Colindale allotment management team.
She sort of welcomed into the allotments and sort of opened up these positions for him on the committee for the Colindale allotments.
In 2016, Rahim Mohammadi became one of the 7 committee members for Colindale allotments. He was now a man of status, entitled to monitor how others behaved.
He'd occupied nearly all of his time, and he was very heavily involved in the politics of the allotment, and he came to have strong views about how it should be managed.
Psychologist Jochen Enke had helped establish a horticultural programme at the Colindale allotments in 2008, and on revisiting, he noticed a change. The day-to-day bureaucracy involved in running an allotment can mean handling friction.
I could see that something was changing in the atmosphere of the allotment. With power struggles and fights, and the tension between Leah and Rahim became stronger, and it was not anymore contained.
Why had Rahim Mohammadi and Leah fallen out?
There were a couple of disputes over just the general running of the allotment, just sort of stuff that sounds like quite sort of tedious and busybodyish, maybe even a little bit petty and that kind of thing. But obviously, when you live in a community like this, those things are so important.
Passions ran deep at the allotment. Leah's approach was to be a peacemaker.
She was well known to all of the plot holders. She'd been the secretary of it for many, many years, and she was much loved by them all.
She knew what she wanted and she knew what she would stand up for, and she would make sure she got it, but she would do it in a way that didn't hurt other people.
Reports suggest that Leah's approach did not align with Rahim Mohammadi's views. He preferred a more assertive stance when addressing the minor infractions of the allotment holders.
Issues like, where are greenhouses allowed? At the end of the allotment plot or at the beginning? These were major disputes, and Rahim was really a sticker for saying, what are the rules?
There was increasing tension between him and Leah Adrisayoko because he found himself increasingly frustrated by the way in which she managed the allotment.
Some saw Mohammadi's reaction to Leah's methods as a reflection of his attitude towards having a female boss, given that Leah held a position of authority over him on the allotment committee.
He struggled that Leah was in charge, and because of her, probably her age, her maturity, her standing and her diplomacy, she had that way of being probably everyone's grandmother, how you could just nurture relationships, and whereas he wanted more of the enforcement and the power struggle, and not to the extent that Leah, who was quite a strong lady, she would feel uncomfortable and nervous around him.
It was reported that Rahim Mohammadi had been heard shouting, ordering his neighbours to tidy their plots.
So he was known to have a short temper, but also known to be able to sort of draw back and return to sort of his more sort of forthcoming and genteel mannerisms, which made it quite hard for people to get a bit of a read on him, I suppose. And there were arguments happening to the point where Leah had to sort of shout Rahim down quite a bit and to sort of take control of situations. And obviously he wasn't a fan of that kind of interaction.
Mohammadi's temper erupted at one particular committee meeting in September 2016.
There were discussions going on about the proposed eviction of a tenant of a plot that was being left undeveloped, and he was venturing his view on the matter, and there came a moment when she told him to shut up. He was described as being extremely cross. At least one of them told the jury that he very clearly heard Mr. Mohammadi call her.
Confronted about his aggression, Mohammadi claimed he was calling Leah by an old nickname she'd been given previously.
We all had nicknames, and I called Leah my little witch. And it came from me because when she was white-haired and she was this kind of, and she loved it.
Whether Mohammadi was in fact using the word witch or the word bitch, Leah was upset by the interaction with Rahim Mohammadi.
Family say that really unsettled her, as she felt uncomfortable, but you couldn't really put your finger on it.
She was, a bit wary of him in trying to, basically distancing herself slightly in terms of, okay, she would work with him for stuff in the allotment and, but not get involved with anything personally.
Leah's family surrounded her for support. They suggested it best that she stay away from Mohammadi.
Don't get too engaged with this guy. Don't get involved beyond what you have to do the stuff for the allotments, but don't bring him in any more than you need to.
Leah considered escalating the incident to the allotment committee, which would have meant Mohammadi would be ordered off the site, but he had a plan to stop her from making that complaint.
He was suggesting that he was going to accuse her of some form of financial malpractice arising from the management of the allotment. I hasten to add, there was not the faintest whiff of any evidence to suggest that this lady had ever misappropriated so much as a penny of the allotment's money. But nevertheless, it did, I think, unsettle her.
There were committee discussions about expelling Rahim Mohammadi, but members stepped back, wanting matters to calm down. They issued a warning, any more transgressions, and he would be out.
If at any moment Leah would have said, as the manager of the allotment, you need to go, Rahim, I can see him cracking up. Leah was not really aware what the allotment meant to Rahim.
It was his case that very shortly after that, they patched up their differences, they said sorry to each other, and it was all a storm in a teacup.
Noel McHugh and his team were building a minute-by-minute timeline of events leading up to the discovery of Leah's body. Everyone nearby was questioned, some re-questioned about what they knew.
Mohammadi was identified as someone on the committee and who had a key to the shed, and the police asked him for that and he surrendered it to them. They took a further statement from him on the Wednesday, a fuller version. On both of those occasions, he was being treated as a witness.
When questioned by police, Mohammadi gave a thorough account of his whereabouts on the day of the murder. He stated that he had called on Leah Adri-Sajoko for coffee.
He would have travelled from Hackney to Colindale. He would have called at a house, had a coffee, general conversation. They spoke about some troublesome individuals on the allotment.
She'd invited him in and prepared him coffee and the like, and that they'd talked about this, that and the other.
He says that he took several journeys backwards and forwards to the shops, to the allotments, and according to him, he had cause to go back to Leah's, and he was returning a measuring tape. He's very specific about that, because she wanted to carpet the stairs.
Family members, meanwhile, told detectives that they knew it had been Leah's intention that day to meet a friend in the afternoon at another allotment about half an hour away from Colindale.
She was due to go to a meeting with a long-term friend and a member of the allotment community up in Barnet.
Was going to involve a journey by her from Colindale tube station and then taking a bus to arrive at the venue at about 7:30 that evening. She'd arranged to meet her friend shortly before that near the bus stop where she was due to disembark.
In the early afternoon of the 27th of February, before setting off, Leah returned to Colindale allotments.
We know from a local resident that they did see her walking generally in the direction of the allotments.
At that time, Rahim Mohammadi was also at the allotments.
So by that time, there would have been very few people on the allotment. He was there on his plot, and by the time that we know that she arrived, the evidence indicated that there may have been no more than two others.
Investigators established that Leah Adri Sajoko and Rahim Mohammadi were on the allotment together for at least 2 hours before she went missing. Had Leah left the allotment that day? If so, where did she go? She did not arrive at her friend's as arranged. Hours later, she would be found dead in the allotment shed. Investigators heard from others at Colindale about the difficulties in Leah Adri Sajoko and Mohammadi's relationship, but had allotment disagreements really led to her death? Police inquiries began to focus on Mohammadi's behaviour on the day leading up to the murder, but also on his reaction to it in the days following.
The following day, the cordons are in place, and so it's attracting a lot of attention. So a really quiet area of London has got police tape up, and people are really interested in what's going on.
Mohammadi, however, showed no interest in the police investigation taking place.
Now, astonishingly, he doesn't try to get in. He doesn't speak to the officers and go in, try and get into the allotment to see what's happened. Bearing in mind, he's interested in every minute detail of what goes on in there. He doesn't knock on Leah's door to her house, nor does he phone her.
As news of Leah's death spread, Rahim Mohammadi called psychotherapist Yochanenka.
He just heard the news that Leah had died, and he was incredibly upset on the phone and kept on saying, "My mother died." And I said, "Look, your mother is dead. Why are you talking your mother has died?" And he was really confused.
For local journalist Rhys Handley, this was unlike anything he'd reported on in Colindale.
Often most of my coverage was related to community things, village fairs and children dressing up for book day and that kind of thing. The residents that I spoke to as well, that they were surprised that something like this could happen, and they were a little bit shaken.
As Rahim Mohammadi was being interviewed at Colindale Police Station, discrepancies began to appear in his account of his movements on the day. His claim that Leah had asked him over to her house to fix the carpet on her stairs was examined.
He said that, there was no carpet on the stairs. She wanted to carpet the stairs. The family said, well, that's not the case. She had no intention of doing that. She could barely afford to get the roof done on the house.
Mohammadi's claims that he had reconciled with Leah after their row stretched credulity. He even claimed she'd suggested he stay over one night.
The family was saying there's no way that she would let him stay over because she wouldn't entertain that. And they suggested a slightly different picture, that Leah felt really awkward about him.
During questioning, Mohammadi stuck to his story.
That he called round at her house on the day that she died, and he saw her there, but there was very good reason to doubt his account of an encounter between the two of them, of some warmth in which she'd invited him in and prepared him coffee and the like.
And Rahim's account starts to unravel, it starts to fall apart. And so from being a significant witness, he suddenly moves to being a suspect, and so we make the decision that he is to be arrested on suspicion of Leah's murder.
He was identified as a suspect on the Thursday, and he was arrested by the police near to his home on the Friday.
Central to Mohammadi's alibi was that he could not have killed Leah Adri Sajoko at the allotments that afternoon. He said he'd been to and from Edgware Road buying materials for work on the allotment. Police located CCTV that tracked Mohammadi's movements on the 27th of February.
We have CCTV of him walking past Sheaves Hill Road. He claims that he's gone up to the local shops to buy a bottle of water to make a cup of tea, and he's then come back to his shed where he doesn't actually make a cup of tea. Just things like that seem really odd. For some reason, he decided on that day he was going to take some bedding, because you could sleep in his shed, and he was going to take it home to wash it. He placed some people in and around the area. Conveniently, some of the times were wrong, clearly to suit himself.
As he was questioned about the inconsistencies which appeared in his story, Mohammadi made a startling revelation, perhaps something to divert suspicion from him.
The way in which Mr. Mohammadi tried to explain his trips to the shop were to meet a dealer who used to work out of a betting shop down on the Edgware Road, that he was going down there to try and meet with him in order that he might be supplied with his opium.
Mohammadi's claim that he was in fact an opium user in need of a fix was quickly disproved. He soon became the police's lead suspect.
You would see his account start to fall apart. The jigsaw just didn't quite fit together when you looked at the detail, when you spoke to the people around him. You know, you look at the fact his movements on the day are very questionable. He told lies.
Days after Leah Adri-Sijoko's lifeless body was found on the Colindale allotments, 42-year-old Rahim Mohammadi continued to deny any involvement in her murder.
So there were no admissions of responsibility from him. There were no eyewitnesses to the killing. Nobody saw any sign of a disturbance. Nobody heard it. The case against him was wholly circumstantial, and it relied upon a combination of a very large number of individual, many of them quite small pieces of evidence, to put together a narrative pointing to him as being the person who was responsible.
Detectives were able to rule out one theory, that a homeless person had stumbled onto the allotments and killed Leah.
This image here shows you the layout of the mower shed, and it shows you the pallets, the general contents, bit messy.
Detective McHugh believes that the shed is not somewhere that a homeless person was likely to have chosen to sleep in, because it would have been difficult to gain access to. Another crucial piece of evidence was the padlock on the shed where Leah was found. It had been opened with a key. Two of the other key holders on the allotment who had access to that shed had alibi evidence which proved their innocence. This left two keys to account for.
These are the 4 keys that were so significant to the investigation. 1 belonged to Rahim, 1 to Leah, 2 to 2 other residents. And we did an enormous amount of work, bearing in mind the officers have smashed that lock to gain entry, to try and save Leah's life. They've then had scientists rebuild the lock to then show that those keys are the ones that opened and closed it.
2 keys had been accounted for as not having been used. A third, Leah's, had also not been used. The only key holder to the shed left was Rahim Mohammadi. It meant that he alone could have got in, committed the crime, and then locked the door behind him. As the inquiry unfolded, more evidence emerged. An autopsy established the use of the lawnmower cord as a weapon with which Leah had been strangled.
The police dismantled the old lawnmower. They took the cord of it out and found upon the cord was DNA that could be identified as coming from her, and at the end of the cord that would have been in the inside of the machine, at the opposite end from the handle, so to speak, was DNA that could be identified as his.
Rahim's DNA was found on the rope that would recoil in, so when the officers cut the cord, the part attached to the lawnmower would then recoil back inside, and so was Leah's DNA found there.
The case against Rahim Mohammadi appeared strong. Police felt they had an accurate picture of what happened that day. They established that the couple had been in another shed from the one Leah's body had been found in, the trading shed.
Leah has come back and she's been in there and an argument has erupted, which has resulted in him striking her because she's got injuries that would suggest she was stunned, which caused her to go to the floor.
She had sustained a number of recent blunt force impacts which had caused fractured ribs, serious bruising to her face. He had a choice about what he was going to do to deal with the consequences of it.
Once he starts, he can't stop. Because the only hope is that he can hide the event and stay on the allotment. It meant so much to them. For Rahim, it was the only... He said, without allotment, I cannot live.
He was going to lose his plot on the allotment. He was potentially going to be facing sort of legal repercussions and that kind of thing. And so the only option with the red mist descending was to kill this innocent old lady.
He struck her, rendered her unconscious, or certainly stunned her. And then she has been moved from the trading shed to the mower shed, where he's then strangled her. So probably unconscious at the time she's been strangled, but unimaginable how you could do that to another human being.
He took the decision, there's no other way of putting it, he took the decision that she had to die. And he must have picked her up. He must have unlocked the door because it was padlocked, and he took her in there in order to do what he then did to her. And he then closed the door and he locked it.
Detectives reconsidered the CCTV footage and Rahim Mohammadi's alleged alibi that he'd been on Edgware Road buying drugs when Leah Adri Sejoko was killed. Investigators had another explanation for his movements captured on CCTV. He had actually been planning the cover-up of the murder.
They were trips to the shop to go to the dry cleaners to dry clean his bed linen and to get some water because he knew he couldn't leave her in the shed. And he was going to stay into the night so that he could unlock the shed and move her elsewhere. But he was thwarted from doing that because other plot holders arrived and parked right opposite. And so he had to leave the allotment with her still in the shed.
The evidence was put to Mohammadi in an interview room. It was compelling, but he still refused to confess his guilt.
I think either he has convinced himself he didn't do it, or he's disassociated from it somehow. So it's not real. He actually, I think the only thing that came close to, from what I can understand, of him showing any kind of remorse is the fact that he covered her face. When her face was covered with an old coat when she was laid out.
Mohammadi went on trial for murder at the Old Bailey in February 2018. His former friend and psychotherapist, Jochen Enke, found Mohammadi's trial difficult.
I saw things differently, and it was so easy to say it's a violent refugee, and of course it has to be accepted, and they painted a very negative picture, and I was very clear fighting that negative picture.
As a journalist, I've attended many murder trials and none are straightforward. In this case, jurors could not reach a decision. The case was deemed a mistrial. A new jury was sworn in. The judge ordered the retrial for November 2018. This time, the verdict was conclusive. Guilty.
Rahim Mohammadi was sentenced by the judge to life imprisonment, which is the only sentence for an offence of murder. Applying the relevant guidelines, the judge fixed the minimum term which he must serve before he may be considered for release at 19 years.
Mohammadi continued to claim he was innocent.
While we believe the right person has been found guilty, it's not something to feel good about at all. you know, it's not about triumph or anything like that. It doesn't bring Mum back. A lot of people said, you know, yeah, at least, you know, there'd be justice for her. If there was actually justice, it would never have happened.
Mark and the family stressed that Mohammadi's background was irrelevant to his mother's death, that the acts of the individual are not representative of the refugee or asylum seeker community. But there's no escaping the profound impact the murder has had on this close-knit community in northwest London.
I had a lot of neighbours who were quite upset by the news and who were quite surprised by it as well, who didn't assume that they would wake up one morning to find out that their lovely 80-year-old neighbour had been murdered by someone that they'd shown so much kindness to as well. She had shown a lot of kindness to Raheem, and obviously he returned it with one of the most horrible things that a human being can do to another one.
What had begun as an incredible friendship between two different people had ended with murder.
It's probably the most ridiculous thing in the world. It feels utterly unreal. If you read about it, or you saw it as something in a drama, you think, no, that's just stupid. And it is. It's such a stupid, wasteful. It's utterly senseless. I mean, it is so ridiculous. Mum wouldn't hurt a person, hurt anything or anyone.
After the events of 2017, 6 people gave up their allotments at Colindale. But today, the allotments continue to thrive. For Detective Noel McHugh, a small satisfaction that at least they caught and helped convict Leah's killer.
It's a fascinating investigation, but horrible because of the trauma it's caused the family and robbed us of a wonderful lady. But also for the team, they've got some really painful memories.
Leah's is a devastating story of deadly wrath and a needless murder, one that took the life of a much-loved grandmother, a woman who had contributed so much to the local community.